Okay, so the issue of the government of national unity obviously has, gotten the country talking, right? And I see that Dr. Welsh is not here, but I want to start with what he said about legitimacy. And we're going to only deal with the hour that we've been given or less, we're going to only deal with about 3 themes. The implications of the government of national unity on economic growth, on economic redress, on strengthening the state or the building the capacity of the state. So those are the key things I want to deal with. But before I want to deal with an overall theme of legitimacy. A lot of people are saying these things are not the same. This is not the GNU. In fact, I think Prof. Landsberg, who I must declare was my master's supervisor, but I hope you won't deal with me in that capacity today. Oh, okay. I've been told to come and sit up front, but I won't see my panel. But if I stand here, apparently the cameras won't see me. Those are some of the compromises that will have to happen in the government of national unity. You may have a good idea, but it may not work for the others. So let's start with the issue of legitimacy, right? In 1994, we had a Mandela, and he had a particular moral, if you like, gravitas that he could use to make sure that this cabinet is coherent. If you listen to Busisiwe, you don't have that Mandela in the current president. If you listen to Dr. Welsh, she's saying the ANC lost elections, but they won the negotiations. So are they legitimate? So let's start there. How do you deal with that legitimacy of the overall government of national unity? Right? Is it enough to say, let's just pull all together and that will give it legitimacy? Or what could be done to sustain its legitimacy? Let's start that with some opening 30 seconds comments.
JJ, no, thanks for that. I think the important thing that we need to remember is we've had an election. And that election, depending on the amount of votes, have given you and the government of national unity legitimacy. First and foremost in terms of governing the country, but at the same time, the bigger question obviously, do they have the prestige, do they have the stature of the Mandela and the F.W. de Klerk of yesteryear? But I think if they start doing what they're supposed to do, focus on what is in the best interest of the country, then certainly they will be able to lay a solid foundation on which they can attain that prestige, and with that, the legitimacy.
Yeah. Quickly, do you think, Prof, that the fact that the ANC is represented out of proportion to its share of the vote in the executive is something that may put a question mark to the legitimacy, and that would need mitigation in the process of, in a sense, the life of the GNU?
So let me answer the last part of your question first, then I come to the question about whether this is a legitimate government. I think that shrewd, at times Machiavellian negotiator of the DA, Ms. Helen Zille, was spot on when she said that President Cyril Ramaphosa caught her off guard with the composition of deputy ministers.
Yes.
Deputy ministers. I think he played a very smart game with the DA. There were no disputes. There was almost consensus that we got our fair share. I think the ANC tried its luck a bit. But to increase the deputy ministry composition to 43. Of which the ANC dominate, I think that there they were caught off guard. Is this a legitimate government? Yes. Could it be more legitimate? Without a doubt. So, why yes? The United States has a doctrine. Every United States president has a doctrine. The current president of the United States has a doctrine called Democrats versus autocrats, democracy versus autocracy. I think there was a hope that things would go so haywire in our country that we could be dragged into the autocratic camp. I think by all accounts, the outcome of the election has shown it's a legitimate government. Whether this legitimate government can work together, we will see. And it's a point we should return to. Final point. Could it be more legitimate? For me, and these colleagues and I always have debates, I think the tragedy about the EFF in particular having been excluded. I say the EFF in particular because that spear of the nation came from nowhere. No one saw it coming. No one saw 45% coming in KwaZulu-Natal. Is that I think sadly the EFF with a huge number of representativity is excluded on the basis of name calling, enemy number one. And yet we forget that in 59 metros, the DA and the EFF worked together. They were never in a coalition together, but worked together against the ANC. Could it be therefore a more representative government where those constituencies that are represented by parties of the poor are there? Absolutely. And I think it's unfortunate that for issues of, listen colleagues, I really want to invoke this thing, attitude, the way we still talk to each other, particularly as black and white folk, as if race does not matter. For me, that's the unfortunate thing that subtract from the legitimacy and acceptability of our democracy.
Well, we hope that they'll become an effective opposition, because the DA,
good point.
After being an effective opposition, I must say, for a long time, can't do that now. Now they must do the things they've been saying the government must do, like getting rid of blue lights, amongst other things. Could you tell me, in terms of the legitimacy, right, whether or not the bloated cabinet, let's be specific on that, because it will link to the issue about the building a capable state. I mean, that's crazy, a crazy cabinet, 76, bigger than the United States by 3 times. You know, and when our GDP is 3 times less, or 4 times less, actually.
I've got a surprise for you, JJ.
Yeah,
it works. If you look at the Indian cabinet, it's even bigger. So
well,
we usually,
but with 1 billion people.
We usually compare to the United States, but let's look at other countries. No, I think the promise was a smaller cabinet. But the situation demanded more flexibility, of course, a bigger cabinet. And in this bigger cabinet, an interesting development was that at least 3 ministers that I can think immediately were kind of demoted to deputy ministers. I think they still keep the salaries as a minister.
Or so we think.
So we think.
Yeah, because they may have been deployed to say, got this one. I mean, how does a Minister of Communication become a Deputy Minister of Communication to a youngster who he should be mentoring?
But I had a discussion with Peter Mulder, who was Deputy Minister, I think, of Agriculture under a previous administration. I said, Peter, explain to me, you were Deputy Minister, what impact did you have on the minister? He said, nothing. He said, we basically met once a month. We never saw each other. So if the deputy ministers are there as a balancing act to the ministers, which in some portfolios it looked like that, I don't think it's going to be very effective. Unless the deputy ministers make themselves part of the ministries in a much more activist way.
Actually, it's interesting you're saying that, because I want you to comment on this. Deputy minister is as effective as they want to be. It's as simple as that. I worked for a minister where the deputy minister was always abroad. And that kind of scenario where they meet once in the 3 months would happen. But I worked for another minister whose deputy was there in all the EXCO meetings every week, right? In fact, the issue of deputy and minister was so controversial, the president had to write a letter to ministers and say, give your deputy minister specific tasks or specific areas of your work that she or he will run with.
Yeah,
and I anticipate that with the JNU, that's what's going to happen. I don't think those deputy ministers are demoted to sit around and do nothing. They are actually not demoted at all, but they are situated there to guard that portfolio. What do you think?
Well, that's exactly what I think is going to happen in this Lekgotla, which I share Dirk's view. I'm a little bit more positive than my colleague on this side about the Lekgotla. I think the SOPs, the standing operating procedures, will be sorted out, especially on the deputy ministers.
Yes.
And I think we have, I mean, when you talk about legitimacy, it's always legality versus legitimacy. We've got an absolute legal government.
Yeah.
The legitimacy will be determined by actions, by decision making, and by moving forward.
Yeah.
And I think that is the big question. And if we listen to some of the previous speakers, I hope our president get a little bit more of a muscle to move. It is his last term. If we use the American example that Chris did, American presidents is usually the strongest in their second term because there's no,
because they don't care about re-election. Right. Let's proceed with this theme about. There's a lot of skepticism in the country about politicians generally, right? Does the GNU make it better or worse, right? Linked with what you are saying, right? There was a lot of song and dance about the moonshot. You know, they were not going to work with the ANC. In fact, they were made to sign, a pledge amongst each other that they will never, unless the moon rises from the other side of the earth, work with the ANC. And in no time, they are in bed with the ANC. Right? What does that do to how the public now continues to view politicians? Here's somebody who was campaigned for 6 months saying ANC is so terrible, and then they're in bed with them.
I mean, just in terms of, I think, credibility among the public, I think this is a moment. I mean, I sense, and obviously it's not evidence-based, but sense a sense of hope among many South Africans, across the political divide, that maybe this is a moment, maybe there's going to be change. That's the first. From outside the country, I think this has actually been good for us because we put together a diverse GNU. Suddenly, our political authority has been rising. It's actually been very good for us, just in terms of even in our negotiating space, given where the world is now. So those two, so let's say there's a technical view. Yeah.
Actually, just linking to that, right, would you then say, in hindsight, and I'm not judging you or any of your moonshot friends, right, in hindsight, is it a good idea to talk about coalition ahead of an election when you don't know whether somebody is going to get 1 seat and another one is going to get 200 seats, and then you are wasting time there talking to, I mean, there's some of the people in the moonshot were very questionable parties. Nobody had ever heard of them. They didn't even get, even a half of what you need to get the 1 seat, right? Which questioned the whole legitimacy again of even that group and what they were trying to do. Would you do this again and say, ahead of the next election and say, let's prepare just in case we win?
I mean, just to start off, I mean, I had cautioned actually publicly. It was actually one of the moments where I actually made a public statement. And normally when you chair independently, you don't make public statements because it was impact in terms of, sort of your internal negotiations. Yeah. But I did say publicly a couple of months ago ahead of the elections that do not have a public conversation about attacking, number one, the ANC or EFF, or saying they're the enemy. You have to follow, when you want to win against the liberation movement, even comparatively, the parties that upstage liberation movement, because there's a certain thing about a liberation movement. It's almost a bit of a religion where people vote based on many other things which are emotional also and so on. And even if people are dissatisfied, they wouldn't normally break away. They would rather not vote. That's why we have the high vote. So if you want to be in opposition, you really have to sow 2 things. First is that you're going to deliver competently, so you don't attack. because if you attack the emotions
Yeah.
of the people that you want to get. So it's a core part. So that, I think that actually backfires.
So it could be a lesson.
It's a lesson learned. By going,
Yeah.
whether I should do it again, I think, in fact, that we've got too many political parties, number
Yeah.
one, just to say that. And that's perhaps that coalitions in a diverse society is the best model.
Yeah, and you
And
give
I
them
think
more
it's-
time
yeah,
to negotiate. You give them not 14 days maybe. So because they gave themselves 5 months to negotiate actually, but on the wrong basis that they were going to win, right? And then now when the reality set in, they had 2 weeks to realign the reality. So maybe like it happens in other jurisdictions, give a little more time so that they can then have agreements in place and so on. And I think that's where Prof, you can come in there, because you question the legitimacy of the Gauteng arrangement, you specifically. But your analysis that is out of proportion with their vote, but it's the same at national. You know, the ANC at national is also out of proportion with the vote. In fact, they bloated the cabinet for reasons of patronage, really. Let's be frank about it, because they could have kept the cabinet the same, and the ANC then gets just less of that small cabinet and give the rest to their 11 friends. So this thing that, no, you had to manage things, it was really to manage ANC politics. But can you deal with the Gauteng thing? I think Gauteng people were quite frank to say they don't want a DA-dominated cabinet, and they ended up with an ANC-dominated cabinet. And I think they learned from what National did.
Well, first of all, they don't. First of all, for example, the Declaration of Intent doesn't say proportionality. It says sort of reflecting the representation. Yeah. So it's not about exactly.
It's broadly proportional, yes.
But if you have received 34% and you have 70% of the seats,
yeah,
that gap is just simply too big. And then you have 3 small parties with 1 seat each.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 seat versus...
With a small budget, yeah.
Versus 7 for the other party. It's imbalanced. You know? In the case of the national one, yes, it is not proportional, but it's not completely imbalanced.
Yeah.
The DA accepted the 6 seats in the cabinet.
Eventually.
Yes, but still, that is in terms of the national results, you know, is more or less actually proportional.
What do you think informed the Gauteng departure from the spirit, as you put it, of the GNU? Do you think it was a self-saving thing, where they didn't want the DA to be anywhere near what's happening in terms of the finances, etc., and they made the negotiations just difficult until the DA said go away? Or was it a true deadlock where they were not seeing eye to eye, which was better dealt with now than express itself in the governance in the next 5 years?
I wasn't privy to the negotiations, so I don't know what happened inside. No, as from outside, what it looks to me is that the first priority is they wanted to establish a government as quickly as possible after the national one.
Yes.
Because there was a vacuum. After the Premier's inauguration, there wasn't an executive anymore, so they had to fill that gap. That was part, I think, of the negotiating leverage on the ANC side to say, you know, take it or leave it, but we need to have a government. We can form a government with that, because this idea of a minority government was one of the 3 options of the ANC right in the beginning, end of May. The so-called confidence and supply agreement.
Yes.
So they've gone for that, but my interpretation is that this current government is the interim government.
It will change.
It will change, and that 7 will be renegotiated.
Yeah.
Prof, can
And they've actually said that.
I know he also wants to come in here.
Yeah.
You cannot have a debate where we all, you know, toe the same line like a bunch of sheep.
Yeah.
So let me break ranks here with some colleagues. So the emphasis on Gauteng has been placed on the ANC wishing to power grab. So at the last juncture before the DA pulled out, Gauteng had offered the DA 3.
Yeah.
But what we all knew all along is that the ANC, in line with what you've called, and all my colleagues call, the national spirit, what happened at National, it was going to bring in some of these
small parties.
These minnows, you know, PA and others. And there was no disrespect to them. So if 2 or 3 had to go to them, then I'm putting it here right now that Madam Zille was then wrong, if not facetious, to say they want to give the DA 3 and they want to grab the rest. I think what actually happened is that point I made about what President Ramaphosa did to them with the deputy ministers. And incidentally, I can give you a brilliant example where deputy ministers were very effective. Aziz Bahat was not very the most ineffective as deputy minister of foreign affairs. Finally, let me just correct these 3 colleagues here.
Okay, please help me.
My friend here was nicer too. He was nicer. Because we both from Gauteng, we feel under attack, and we stay too close to each other. But on a serious note, I was not being pessimistic about what's about to unfold tonight. And the idea that I disagree with Prof. Kotze and with you, Prof, is actually wrong. I actually am saying to you, the fact that one party tonight is going in there with the idea that we're starting on a clean slate, and that the Constitution does not count. Your point that the Constitution does not count is not true. I am as optimistic as you are, Dirk, that we are actually going to get even a 70%, 80% consensus government program.
On many things. Can I come in there, because I think you have helped me to plant the seed to the next theme now, right? Busisiwe Mavuza, I'm sorry she left before she comes to account to this. She says the people may rise if we don't do something. If we keep the status quo, the people may rise. But a lot of people may say, in fact, the GNU was an attempt to keep the status quo because the ANC didn't want to turn right or left, so they decided to stand in the middle, right? Now, can you deal with that in as far as the economy is concerned? Well, let me start with you, right? Do you think, right, that the GNU will make the people appetite to rise less or more in as far as the economic questions are concerned?
JJ, just before, I just wanted to get to that Gauteng again. Why it is such an issue? I will give you very short. I mean, why is this such an issue? Because if you look at the numbers in Gauteng, between the ANC, the DA, and the other parties, I mean, it's very, very tight. They should have had a much more diversified because of the outcome. If the ANC, for example, have gotten in the 40s, it's a different story. And so on. And that is why it is such a key. And actually, the Gauteng may actually be the point that disrupt the ANC national. The fight has actually started in Gauteng. An opposition, so it's actually the brewing, and where Ramaphosa is going to be
they could have been more kind in terms of balancing the power within the executive, given the electoral outcome that was so close to each other. I think that's what people are lamenting about. But there was also a slight arrogance on the part of the DA, you know, trying to run the show when they were not the #1 party, right? And I think that's where there was a deadlock at the end. They should have taken the 3 and then let the ANC worry about how to bring the other 3 parties and then be left with the rest. But they refused the 3 because they wanted more and they didn't care about the other parties. But they will come to that. Can you deal with the economy now? Let's leave Gauteng alone.
Let me first ask Prof. Kotze just to move his seat inwards, because I don't want him to fall there, you know. If you look at our national budget, right, it amounts to the revenue there in total is about 2.3 trillion rand. 70% of that budget goes towards social interventions. That's health, it's education, you name it, and so forth. A mere 10%, about 200 billion, goes towards real economic interventions, of which agriculture gets 0.8%. For land reform, it's minuscule in terms of the bigger budget. So what is our bigger problem? Our bigger problem is that 400 billion that is going towards social interventions, or more so welfare interventions. That amount has been growing for the past decade almost. And what is our bigger problem? The amount of money that flows into the fiscus has a
It's dropped.
downward trajectory. So in time to come, we will have to go borrow more, and we've seen how that borrowing has grown now almost to 300 billion rand per annum. That's just the interest that we pay back. So our government is in a fix. It's bankrupt. It's basically going to run out of money soon. And then nobody will borrow you any more money because you use that money just to prop up or to maintain social stability.
Yeah.
The sooner they can get foreign direct investment into country, get this country growing again in terms of, because what is happening, our population is growing, threefold over the past decade.
And you're saying they failed to do that, but the new government friends will help them to do it, because now they will have new people who are going to say, no, but
Remember,
you can't borrow so much.
Chris was right. There's a lot of people there in Washington that sits with their wallets open to say, listen, if you do this, we're going to support you.
Yeah.
So we are trapped between the devil and the deep blue sea in terms of how do we want to take this forward. And I would say, let's get our American friends to put their money where their mouths are and get this country growing. Otherwise, we're going to have serious trouble.
All right. Can you link that? No, I want you to deal with this as well. On the issue of the economy. Busima Vu says improvement may rise. They will not rise now when they see the government of national unity, because they'll think sense may prevail. Is that the general narrative of linking what the people want and what we're setting out tonight to push as a new policy? Because there's going to be, if it's a new government of national unity, in a sense, there's going to be new policies from tonight.
I don't want to repeat what I said earlier about a developmental state and the #1 criteria. If you are anti-economic growth, so if you belong to the so-called radical economic transformation group, and I sometimes wonder how radical
they really are. Yeah.
And you are anti-economic growth, then to quote the former Iron Lady of Britain, Madam Margaret Thatcher, you live in cloud cuckoo land. You're not serious. If you are not serious about economic growth. But I want to caution, and I want to link it to the last parts of Prof. Kotz's presentation, when he dabbled into this debate about what did we really need to go for a GNU and are there crises. There is a social crisis that's playing out in this country.
Yes.
And we don't have to look far. We just have to look at what happened to Minister William Ratto. And as we speak, the masses are on the ground again.
Yeah, and he has to fire his whole cabinet.
I wish to suggest to you, it's a dire prediction that we will have our youth bulge unless we make, in other words, our Arab Spring or our winter of discontent. Sooner rather than later, unless we make serious upliftment into the plight of our people socio-economically, the priority. So there again, I am optimistic that even the DA that says quality of opportunity versus the ANC that says redistribution through, for example, social grants, whatever models they are, they need to come urgent, they need to be serious, and I would be the first to say to you, surprise, surprise, there will be consensus tonight on the economic issues.
Can please come in there on redress, because a lot of people are saying, yes, we want economic growth, right? But they don't believe that the GNU can deal with the issue of redress, because that redress is linked to what I want to call various time bombs that are facing us. 68% unemployment of youth.
JJ, let me...
Zero economic growth.
Let me declare my interest.
Yes.
I'm not a metro man. I'm a rural man. Although my address is UJ, my home is Potchefstroom. So I speak freely about the Northwest, the Free State, the Northern Cape, and those areas. And the issue of the people will start marching is not at the national level. The issue is at the local level.
Yeah.
And the decline,
they can't march nationally anyway. They have to march where they live.
The weakest link is local government. And they must march where they live.
Yeah, they must march where they live,
and that challenge Dirk showed, 2026 is the next key date in many ways. But with local government elections and the government of national unity. And the positive thing that I've seen so far in terms of your question is that the formation of the government of national unity, despite all the issues and the little things, has increased the expectation, the economic climate. Remember, a lot of the economy is about the climate, how people feel about what they expect, what they think can happen. That is a positive part of the government of national unity. And I think a lot of investments, counting the cranes when I travel through Joburg and Pretoria and those things, that tells me whether something is going on or not. There's not much going on. So I'm expecting a lot of these construction stuff to start rising. Then we will know economic growth. And economic growth has got, like Chris said, a spin-off effect. But I'm concerned about rural South Africa.
All right. That's interesting, but it still doesn't answer my question about redress, right? Let's be serious about that issue in terms of what will happen tonight. You know, he's predicting something's going to cook in the next 2 days, right? Let's take a simple example of employment equity. The DA is in court now saying we don't want that, right? They're not talking on the sidelines. They're in court saying we don't like that. We don't like the NHI. I'm told they have toned down yesterday after Muzwaledi. You know, the newspapers are saying he doubled down on NHI. So if you just take those two things, NHI is meant to somehow bridge the gap between, you know, the health and the health, not on the health issue. Employment equity is somehow supposed to, you know, encourage private sector, right, to relook at how their hiring patterns are. Just those two things, you know, a government of national unity that takes redress seriously. How can we have a middle ground on that? Because the ordinary person is saying, it's been 30 years. You are telling me about the affirmative action that does actually exist when I look at the reports of the Department of Labor about the hiring patterns of the private sector. That Mavuso told us it's owned 60% by foreigners who actually don't care about your affirmative action.
I mean, just first to say, you know, there is not a conflict between growth and redress. I mean, just to put it, I mean, and I know a lot of people would say that, but there isn't. The first thing is just to do things right will actually, on its own, almost deliver redress. I mean, just fixing a hospital, a public hospital, without having to go out there and go form something totally new. Deal with the issues really. If you get a public hospital, I mean, because we're talking about health now.
Working properly.
Get it working properly, employ people properly, clean it up properly, get proper, when we say it, you know, you get tenders around. I mean, there is, I mean, our tender budget nationally is like 400 billion, 500 billion. And according to the Treasury, of that 400, you know, 250 billion disappear.
It's wasted.
You know, so let's forget even to talk about equity, but just getting it right, that delivers almost on its own equity, and it will deliver on its own. That's quite important. But the second one, if we bring in the non-state, in a proper social pact, not you know, unions who are linked to the ANC and so on, a proper social pact. And then an agreement can be between the GNU and business. I mean, there's already is, you know, where we've got 150 CEOs that have been engaging with governments. Obviously, the government hasn't been so enthusiastic about them. But can we, for example, come together and say, with those companies who are already working with the state, can they work with the GNU? Can we then look at the state-owned companies in which the state has shareholding? I mean, even an Anglo-American state has shareholding in it through a PIC. So, and so on. And then it can be built a different compact to bring the youth in.
So a capable state can actually result in redress.
Absolutely.
If you just did things, you just remove the wastage. Because, I mean, the Auditor General tells us that there's 60 billion now. It was 40, then it became 50, 60 billion annually wasted by municipalities, by government departments, that money could actually be rerouted, if you like, for services that would deal with issues of redress. That's really what you're saying.
Just
yes.
very quickly, our annual salaries for state employees amount to 700 billion rand out of the 2.3 trillion.
Yeah.
Works towards about, almost 40% of our national budget goes towards salaries. The big question that we need to ask is, what is the return on that investment?
Yeah.
If we have people appointed, people must be held accountable.
Yeah.
Our biggest challenge
so
is not about anything else. It's about holding people accountable.
So GNU would do what? Because there's a big debate there about that the state is bloated and so on.
For you alone?
No, wait. No, sorry. Before the staff claps for him, I want you to answer the question. Then what would the GNU do? Because there's a big question in the elephant in the room about your public servant is bloated. Because when you cut it, also you are now increasing unemployment. Others will argue. What will you do?
For me, the starting point would be a performance assessment system.
But it's already there.
No,
they give each other bonuses over
it. If you look, for example, a teacher is supposed to be at school at 8 o'clock and work until 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But how many people are really at school? I mean, I traveled a lot throughout the country. I was just the other day on my way to some place, and school was out already at 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock. The poor
kids already walking around.
Walking around.
Yeah.
Now,
so you need inspectors.
Precisely. But now you're going to bloat it even further.
Oh, no. Prof, can you comment on the issue of the strengthening of the state? Because there's going to be a big thing about ESCOM, fixing Transnet, fixing SOEs, because that's where the state capture is happening, because they will dump, they will just dump a teacher to run an airline without thinking twice. May her soul rest in peace. Yeah. Okay.
No, this is a broader debate, I would say, about the capacity of the state. Because it goes into ideological debate about to what extent, what should be the role of the state. Is it this of the so-called developmental state, which means that it's about capacity and so on? Most developmental states were obviously one-party states, remember that?
Yes.
They were undemocratic. So the democratic developmental states don't exist yet. And we want to create one. With trade unions, public sector trade unions, and all of those things, which didn't exist in Singapore and in Hong Kong and South Korea and so on. So the comparison is not a valid one, I think, but capacity in terms of providing the basic civil public services, yes. That is absolutely necessary. But if you start to go into economic activity, then it becomes a debatable issue. And then and that's where I would say the more expensive skills are required. Whether you need medical public servants, whether you need, we at universities are public servants, so that's part of the capacity of the state, I would argue. So I think the problem is at
so there was second you to go and help one department.
Yes. So the real point is at the service delivery level. That there is not enough capacity. So what does it mean? They appoint more and more people. In order to do a job that one person could have done, there are now 3 or 4 in order to do it.
Do you think the GNU will agree on the mechanism to strengthen the state? Because already the slip was showing when the DA said, we want to appoint our own DGs now. We want a DG and a deputy minister and a minister in one area so that it becomes an island there of excellence so that we're not drowned by the failure of the rest.
But don't you think those are typical arguments in negotiations? That you put it up there, that the hurdle is too high.
No, they were serious. They wanted DGs of their own.
They weren't serious.
No, they were, because actually they couldn't do that because even the current ANC ministers, DGs, are not appointed by the ministers in those departments. They are appointed by the president. Those ministers can only recommend.
Not even the president.
Can I just correct you on that? Because that is not true. I didn't demand that. Just 2 things on the states. They don't have to do come up with new policies. I mean, I was part of the audit, which is a government audit by Ramaphosa of the state itself. We made the recommendations. Not one of the recommendations have been implemented. And the DA and all of these parties. I was also the chief advisor of the Presidential Review Committee in 2009 on state-owned entities. So I did an audit of the state-owned entities.
That thick report.
That thick
it's
report.
gathering dust.
Not one. Think about it. Not one
recommendation was implemented. So maybe the GNU must just look at that report.
So in a sense, what's just happened is because, you know, those type of recommendations is exactly what we all want, pragmatically. That's it. Just to implement that and just do it.
Yeah, all right.
I just want to bring in, Prof, some basic, crude politics here. Okay. Roof, waar is jy? Ek het jou gesien voor hom. Lekker om weer te sien. Now I'm going to put the former minister on the spot. Before the election in 1994, the amount of shredders they bought in Pretoria to get rid of files, dirty tricks, man, those things worked overnight. So why am I talking about 94 now? I want to bring it back to 2024. You will be surprised. No.
No, come on.
We'll have coffee outside. You will be surprised that after the election, the ANC was stuck in the first level of grief for 3 days. They did not know
what to do.
What just happened? Is it 40? He said 30.
It's 39.8.
Right? Whatever. But on a serious note, I want to tell you something interesting what happened since they started the negotiations of a GNU. You know, somebody gave them something to latch onto. And now, the amount of budget savings they have done by cutting on travel, on 4 houses, new BMWs, no, go and give it back, say you want that, you know, what's the one you've driven for 4 months already? The BM, you know, take this back. But on a serious note, the amount of, there's a seriousness that is going on. So let me conclude on this point about the state. And latch on to the point where you said, because there seems to be a dialogue of the deaf between these 4 about whether there will be tonight something coming or it will be doomsday tomorrow, right? The moonshot will become a doom's moon, right? I actually want to tell you that there are some crude, hard-nosed negotiations that's going to go on. It's not going to be, you believe in this form of redress, you believe in this form. There will be serious give and take. And I suggest to you in 2 days, all they can do is to be ready for next week. When is the 18th? It's next week Thursday. Next week Thursday, the president has to
announce something.
Do a state of the nation. There will be a program. But these negotiation and cabinet meetings are going to go on, and the centrality of rebuilding what Ashilin Bembe has called, and we don't give him enough credit for the phrase, Prof, people just quote this phrase, the hollowing out of the state during President Zuma and other periods, right? We've left an empty state. And now we're going to have to go and
rebuild. All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but I want, in 30 seconds, each of you to give one line of advice to the GNU in order to succeed. Because this is what we have now. It has to succeed. I heard that, I think it was one of the panelists saying that, I think it was you, Prof, who said that the other people are invested in the state failing. But remember, they're not in power, so they can only wish for failure and point out failure, but they can't generate the failure themselves. The people who can fail are the ones who are given the budget and the power. So, a piece of advice to the GNU quickly in 30 seconds.
Build
for success.
They must build trust in each other.
They must trust in each other.
They must build trust.
Build trust, okay.
Even if they mistrust, don't trust each other, that's the point of departure.
All right.
Once you trust each other, then you can go into other.
No, wonderful. Prof?
They must govern in the public interest. So all decisions has to be in the public interest, not party.
Govern in the public interest.
I think
Yours?
I think they must invest in technical committees between parties and cabinet, between parties and things, so that those things can be cleared out as a clearinghouse between they get to cabinet level and government of national.
So that they don't have public spats and what have you that was already started now in the last 2 weeks, okay?
If you are there for power grab and to enhance the reputation of your party and its narrow constituency, leave before the Lagotla tonight, join the opposition, so that those who are serious to build a united,
can actually stay.
non-sexist, a non-racist South Africa in which all of us belong and have a place under the sun. If you're not there for that, please join the opposition benches.
Thank you very much. Christo, you got the last word.
You know, we are very good at designing plans. There's my colleague over there. We've been part of Agripakisa. We were part of the AAMP. It's the Agro Processing Master Plan.
There's a Grisa NDP,
you name it.
Yeah.
Some of those plans, there are good elements in it. You don't have to appoint, again, a 15 million rand team to go and design plans. Go take off those plans, dust it off. What are the elements that you can implement now, the low-hanging fruit, and get going? Because we are now fed up
could create confidence as well, because the whole world is watching, the whole country is watching. But I think that, thank you for all your excellent inputs. I think because this is being recorded, I think it need to be summarized and sent to the GNU. I think when they see all of your names signed below that report, they may well take it seriously. Thank you very much.